Bear cub was caught between closing floodgates of a dam. What this baby did was shocking. Let us know where you're watching from. If you love my content, consider supporting it with a super thanks. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe. It'll help us to remain in touch with amazing people like you. The morning air felt different that day. Heavy, like the earth itself was holding its breath. Maya Chen stood at her kitchen window, watching her 18-month-old daughter Lily toddle around the living room with that wobbly determination only babies possess. The little girl clutched a worn stuffed rabbit, her dark hair catching the pale sunlight that filtered through the curtains. Outside, the Clearwater Dam stretched across the valley like a concrete giant. Maya had grown up in this small town, Shadow Falls, and the dam had always been there, a constant presence that controlled the wild river rushing through the mountains. Her grandmother used to tell stories about the days before the dam, when the river would flood every spring, bringing both life and destruction to the valley. "Mama!" Lily squealed, pointing toward the window. Maya turned to look, expecting to see a bird or maybe one of the neighbor's cats. Instead, her breath caught in her throat. On the far side of the dam, near the edge of the forest, a small brown shape was moving along the rocky shore. At first, Maya thought it might be a dog that had wandered too close to the water, but as she squinted through the morning haze, she realized what she was looking at. A bear cub, alone. Maya's heart started beating faster. Bears weren't uncommon in the area, but they usually stayed deep in the woods, especially the mothers with cubs. This little one looked lost, sniffing around the water's edge like it was searching for something. "Where's your mama, little one?" Maya whispered to herself. Lily had gone quiet behind her, as if sensing her mother's tension. The baby crawled over to the window and pulled herself up on unsteady legs, pressing her tiny hands against the glass. Her eyes widened as she spotted the cub. "Doggy," Lily pointed excitedly. "Not a doggy, sweetheart," Maya said softly, lifting Lily up to get a better view. "That's a baby bear." The cub was getting closer to the dam now, following the shoreline with curiosity that reminded Maya painfully of her own daughter's fearless exploration of the world. It pawed at something in the shallow water, maybe a fish or just an interesting rock. That's when Maya noticed something else, something that made her stomach drop. The warning lights on the dam's control tower were flashing red. She'd seen those lights before, during the monthly maintenance checks. They meant the floodgates were about to cycle, an automated process that happened every few weeks to test the machinery and regulate water levels. Maya grabbed her phone, fumbling to call her neighbor who worked at the dam. But before she could dial, a loud mechanical groan echoed across the valley. The sound of massive gears beginning to turn. The floodgates were starting to move. "No, no, no," Maya breathed, watching in horror as the cub continued to play in the shallow water, completely unaware of the danger approaching. Lily pressed her face against the window, leaving tiny handprints on the glass. She seemed mesmerized by the small bear, making soft cooing sounds as if trying to communicate with it. The mechanical groaning grew louder. Maya could see the gates beginning their slow descent, like the jaws of some ancient monster preparing to close. The process took about 15 minutes from start to finish. Plenty of time for the cub to escape if it just moved away from the water. But the little bear was transfixed by something in the shallows. It waded deeper, following what looked like a school of small fish. Maya realized, with growing dread, that the cub was heading directly toward the space between the closing gates. "Move, baby, move," she whispered desperately. That's when she heard it, a sound that chilled her to the bone. A deep, mournful roar echoing from the forest. The mother bear was calling for her cub, but instead of running toward the sound, the little cub seemed to panic. It splashed frantically in the water, calling back to its mother with high-pitched cries. In its confusion and fear, it moved even closer to the dam. Maya watched in helpless terror as the cub suddenly slipped on the wet rocks. It tumbled forward, right into the narrow channel between the two massive floodgates. The water there was deeper, flowing fast as it was funneled toward the dam's outlets. The cub struggled to keep its head above the rushing water, its small paws scrabbling against the smooth concrete walls of the channel. But the walls were too high, too steep. It was trapped, and the gates were still closing. Lily suddenly started crying. Not her usual fussy cry, but something deeper, more urgent. She pressed both hands against the window and wailed, as if she somehow understood the tragedy unfolding before them. Maya felt tears streaming down her face as she held her daughter close. She was too far away to help. Even if she ran as fast as she could, she'd never reach the dam in time. The bear cub was going to die, and there was nothing she could do to stop it. The mother bear's roars grew louder, more desperate. Maya could see her now, a massive brown shape emerging from the tree line. The bear was running toward the dam, but she was coming from the wrong direction. By the time she reached the water, it would be too late. "I'm so sorry, little one," Maya whispered, unable to look away from the horrible scene. But then, something extraordinary happened. Lily stopped crying. She wiped her eyes with the back of her tiny hand and stared intently at the trapped cub. Her little mouth opened as if she was trying to say something, but only soft sounds came out. The baby turned to look at her mother with an expression Maya had never seen before. It was as if Lily was trying to tell her something important, something urgent. The little girl squirmed in Maya's arms, reaching toward the door. "No, sweetheart," Maya said gently. "We can't go outside right now." But Lily wouldn't give up. She pointed toward the door, then toward the window, then back to the door again. Her baby babble became more insistent, more focused. She was trying to communicate something, and her frustration was growing with each passing second. Maya looked back toward the dam. The floodgates had closed another few feet. The cub was still struggling in the water, its cries growing weaker. The space between the gates was getting narrower and narrower. That's when Maya noticed something that made her gasp. There was someone else at the dam. A man in a bright orange vest was walking along the maintenance walkway that ran across the top of the floodgates. From this distance, Maya couldn't make out his face, but she could see him checking something on a clipboard. He seemed completely focused on his work, oblivious to the drama unfolding below him. "Thank God," Maya breathed. "He'll see the cub." But as she watched, the man finished whatever he was doing and started walking away, back toward the control building. He never once looked down at the water. Lily's babbling became more frantic. She twisted in Maya's arms, reaching toward the window with both hands. Her little face was red with effort as she tried to make her mother understand something. "Mama, Mama!" Lily cried, pointing insistently at the dam. Maya looked between her daughter and the tragic scene outside. The cub was growing weaker, its struggles becoming less coordinated as exhaustion set in. The cold mountain water was sapping its strength. The floodgates had closed another 2 feet, leaving maybe 8 feet of space between them. The mother bear had reached the shoreline now, pacing frantically along the water's edge. She roared again and again, but she couldn't reach her baby. The channel was too deep, the concrete walls too smooth and steep. If she jumped in, she'd be trapped too. Maya made a decision. Holding Lily tightly, she ran to the back door and stepped outside onto her small porch. From here, she had a clearer view of the dam, and the situation looked even worse than she'd thought. The worker was nowhere to be seen now, probably back inside the control building. Maya cupped her hands around her mouth and shouted as loud as she could, "Help! There's a bear cub in the water!" but her voice was lost in the sound of rushing water and grinding machinery. She was too far away, and the man was probably inside a soundproof building. Lily suddenly went very still in Maya's arms. The baby stared intently at the dam, her dark eyes focused with an intensity that seemed impossible for someone so young. Then, without warning, she let out a piercing scream. It wasn't a cry of distress or hunger. It was something else entirely, a sound Maya had never heard her daughter make before. It was incredibly loud, almost like a siren, and it seemed to go on forever. Maya was so startled she almost dropped Lily. Where had that sound come from? Her sweet, quiet baby had never screamed like that before. But then something amazing happened. Dogs all over the neighborhood started barking. Maya could hear them from several blocks away, a chorus of alarmed voices responding to something they'd heard in Lily's cry. The sound spread like a wave through shadow falls. More dogs joined in, then some cats began yowling. Even the horses in the pasture behind the miller's house were whinnying and stamping their hooves. And then Maya heard something that made her heart race. From the dam, the mother bear's roars suddenly changed. They became more urgent, more desperate. The massive animal was looking around wildly, as if she'd heard something that alarmed her even more than her cub's danger. But it wasn't just the mother bear who'd heard something different. Every animal in the valley seemed to be responding to Lily's call. Birds exploded from the trees in great flocks, circling overhead and crying out. Squirrels chattered frantically. Even cattle in distant fields were lowing and moving restlessly. Maya stared at her daughter in amazement. Lily had stopped screaming and was watching the scene at the dam with calm attention, as if she knew exactly what she'd done. "What was that, baby?" Maya whispered. "What did you just do?" Before Lily could respond, not that she could with words anyway, something new happened at the dam. The mother bear suddenly reared up on her hind legs and let out a roar so loud it echoed off the mountains. But she wasn't looking at her trapped cub anymore. She was looking up at the control building. That's when Maya saw him again. The worker in the orange vest. He'd come outside, probably drawn by all the noise from the animals. He was standing on the building's small balcony, looking around in confusion at the chaos that had erupted in the valley. The mother bear roared again, and this time the man looked down at her. Maya watched as his gaze followed the bear's obvious distress toward the water. His posture changed instantly when he spotted the cub. Even from a distance, Maya could see him react with shock and alarm. He disappeared back into the building, probably running for the emergency controls. But time was running short. The floodgates had continued their relentless descent during all this commotion. There were maybe 6 feet of space left between them. The cub was barely keeping its head above water now. Its movements were sluggish, weakened by cold and exhaustion. The rushing current kept pushing it toward one of the gate edges, where the metal was coming down like a massive guillotine. Maya felt tears streaming down her face again. Even if the worker had seen, would he be able to stop the gates in time? Lily stirred in her arms and made a soft sound. Not a cry this time, but something gentle and musical. It reminded Maya of the lullabies she sang to put her daughter to sleep. But this tiny lullaby seemed to have an extraordinary effect. The cub in the water stopped struggling for a moment and lifted its head, as if it too had heard the sound. For just an instant the little bear looked directly toward Maya's house, directly toward Lily. And in that moment, something passed between them. Some connection that Maya couldn't understand but could feel with every fiber of her being. The mother bear had gone quiet too, watching her cub with intense attention. The chaos of barking dogs and crying birds faded into the background. Everything seemed to hold its breath. Then, from the dam, came the sound Maya had been praying for, the mechanical groaning of gears changing direction. The floodgates shuddered to a stop, then slowly began to rise. The worker had reached the controls just in time, but the drama wasn't over yet. The cub was too weak to climb out on its own, and the water was still rushing fast through the channel. Even with the gates rising, the little bear was in danger of being swept deeper into the dam's machinery. Maya watched helplessly as the worker ran from the control building toward the water. He was carrying something, a rope maybe, or a net. But would he be fast enough? The mother bear seemed to understand that help was coming. She paced along the shore, making low grunting sounds that might have been encouragement to her baby. But the cub was fading fast. Its head kept dipping below the surface, staying under longer each time before bobbing back up. That's when Lily did something that took Maya's breath away. The baby reached out one tiny hand toward the dam and opened her fingers wide. She made that soft, musical sound again, longer this time, like a song without words. And somehow, impossibly, the cub responded. It lifted its head one more time and began swimming. Not frantically like before, but with slow, determined strokes toward the concrete wall where the worker was preparing to help. Maya couldn't believe what she was seeing. Her 18-month-old daughter seemed to be guiding a wild bear cub to safety with nothing but her voice and gestures. The worker had positioned himself at the edge of the channel with what looked like a rescue harness on a long pole. As the cub approached, he carefully maneuvered the device into the water. It took several tries, but finally the exhausted little bear managed to grab onto the harness with its paws. The man pulled gently but steadily, lifting the cub out of the rushing water and onto the concrete walkway. Maya let out a sob of relief. The cub was safe, but her relief turned to concern as she watched the next scene unfold. The mother bear, seeing her baby on the opposite side of the channel, let out a roar of frustration. She began pacing back and forth, clearly trying to figure out how to reach her cub. The water between them was too wide and too fast for her to cross safely. The worker seemed to understand the problem. He was backing away from the cub, giving it space while obviously trying to figure out how to reunite the little family. The cub, meanwhile, was shivering on the cold concrete. It called pitifully to its mother, but couldn't seem to find the strength to move. Maya felt helpless again. The immediate danger was over, but the mother and cub were still separated. And winter was coming. The cub needed its mother to survive. That's when she noticed that Lily had gone very quiet again. The baby was studying the scene with that same intense focus she'd shown before. Then Lily began to babble again, but this time it sounded different. More like she was having a conversation with someone Maya couldn't see. "Who are you talking to, sweetheart?" Maya asked softly. Lily pointed toward the forest behind the dam, then toward the trapped cub, then back to the forest. She kept repeating the gesture, becoming more animated each time. Maya followed her daughter's pointing finger and gasped. More bears were emerging from the tree line. Not just one or two, but what looked like a whole family group. Maya counted at least 4 adults, including what might have been the cub's grandmother, a massive female with graying fur around her muzzle. But, strangest of all, they weren't behaving aggressively. They moved with purpose, but also with something that looked almost like caution? Respect? They approached the shoreline where the mother bear was pacing, and Maya watched in amazement as what appeared to be a complex bear conversation took place. There was much grunting and subtle body language that Maya couldn't interpret. Then, to her absolute shock, the oldest female bear looked directly across the valley toward Maya's house, toward Lily. The ancient bear studied the baby for a long moment, then made a sound Maya had never heard before, low and rumbling, but somehow gentle. Lily clapped her hands and laughed in response, as if the old bear had just told her a delightful joke. "This is impossible," Maya whispered to herself. But she couldn't deny what she was seeing. The group of bears had formed what looked like a plan. Two of the younger adults began walking along the shoreline in opposite directions, clearly searching for a way to cross the channel upstream or downstream. The worker at the dam seemed stunned by the arrival of so many bears. He'd climbed onto a platform about 10 feet above the walkway, probably for safety, but he didn't leave. Instead, he was watching the situation with the same fascination Maya felt. The cub on the walkway had stopped shivering and was now calling to the other bears. Its voice was stronger, more confident. The old grandmother bear responded with encouraging grunts. One of the younger bears had apparently found what it was looking for upstream. It let out a series of huffing barks, and the mother bear immediately ran toward the sound. Maya realized that the bears had found a crossing point, probably where the channel narrowed before feeding into the dam. But crossing would be dangerous, especially with the water running so high and fast from the recent rains. As if responding to Maya's concern, Lily began humming. It was barely audible, just a soft, rhythmic sound that seemed to match the rhythm of her breathing. And once again, something extraordinary happened. The wind in the valley shifted. Maya felt it first as a gentle breeze on her face, but it quickly grew stronger. It was blowing from the mountains toward the dam, following the path of the river. The wind seemed to have an effect on the water itself. While Maya couldn't see exactly what was happening at the crossing point from her position, she could hear a change in the sound of rushing water. It became quieter, less turbulent. Minutes passed. Then Maya heard triumphant roaring from the direction of the dam. The mother bear had made it across. Maya watched through tears of joy as the massive animal galloped along the concrete walkway toward her stranded cub. The worker pressed himself back against the control building as she passed, but the bear paid him no attention. She had eyes only for her baby. The reunion was beautiful and heartbreaking at the same time. The mother bear gathered her cub against her with infinite gentleness, checking every inch of its small body for injuries. The cub buried its face in its mother's fur and made contented chirping sounds. But the story didn't end there. Before leaving, the mother bear did something that would haunt Maya's dreams for years to come. She stood up on her hind legs and looked directly across the valley at Maya and Lily. For a moment that seemed to stretch into eternity, the wild animal and the human baby looked at each other across the distance. Then the mother bear raised one massive paw and held it up toward them. Maya's breath caught in her throat. It looked for all the world like a gesture of gratitude. Lily laughed and waved back with her tiny hand. Only then did the mother bear drop to all fours, gently nudge her cub to its feet, and begin the journey back to the forest. The other bears followed, disappearing one by one into the shadows between the trees. The valley fell quiet again, except for the normal sounds of water and wind. Maya stood on her porch, holding her remarkable daughter, trying to process what had just happened. Every rational part of her mind insisted it had been coincidence, a series of lucky accidents that had saved the cub's life. But her heart told her a different story. Her heart told her that her baby daughter had somehow communicated with wild animals across an impossible distance, had called for help in a language older than words, and had witnessed the response of a community that transcended species. The worker at the dam was checking his controls, probably wondering if the wind that had helped the mother bear cross the channel had been natural, or if somehow the emergency protocols had affected the water flow without him realizing it. Maya knew he'd never believe the truth. She looked down at Lily, who had settled peacefully in her arms, and was now chewing contentedly on the ear of her stuffed rabbit. "What are you, little one?" Maya whispered. "What gift do you have?" Lily looked up at her mother with bright, intelligent eyes and smiled. Just a normal baby smile, sweet and innocent. But Maya noticed something she'd never seen before. In the depths of her daughter's dark eyes, there seemed to be an ancient wisdom, something that spoke of deep connections to the natural world, of understanding that went far beyond human language. As they went back inside the house, Maya found herself wondering what other surprising abilities her daughter might reveal as she grew older. And somewhere in the mountains above Shadow Falls, a family of bears settled in for the night, with a story of their own to tell about the day a human cub had saved one of their own. But for Maya and Lily, the day was far from over. That evening, as Maya prepared dinner with Lily playing in her high chair, something strange began happening in their house. It started with small things, the radio crackling with static even though the signal had been clear all day, the lights flickering without any apparent cause, and the temperature dropping several degrees despite the heating being on. Lily seemed completely unbothered by these disturbances. In fact, she appeared more alert and engaged than usual, babbling constantly in what sounded like different patterns and rhythms. Sometimes her sounds were musical, like before, but other times they were rhythmic clicks and chirps that Maya had never heard her make. The phone rang, startling Maya from her observations. It was her neighbor, Mrs. Patterson. "Maya, dear, are you having any trouble with your electronics tonight? My television keeps changing channels by itself, and my dog hasn't stopped whining since this afternoon." "We're having some issues, too," Maya admitted, glancing at Lily, who was now making soft whistling sounds while stacking her colored blocks. "Has this happened before?" "Never, and it's not just me. I've gotten calls from half the neighborhood. Everyone's pets are acting strange. The Hendersons' cat hasn't come down from their attic all evening, and old Tom's chickens are making the most awful racket." After hanging up, Maya felt a growing unease. She tried to convince herself it was coincidence, but deep down, she suspected it had something to do with what had happened at the dam. As if sensing her mother's thoughts, Lily looked up from her blocks and pointed toward the window. Outside, the sky was darkening rapidly, but it wasn't just the normal sunset. Dark clouds were gathering over the mountains with unusual speed, and the air felt heavy with electricity. Maya picked up Lily and walked to the window. In the distance, she could see lights starting to come on early in houses throughout Shadow Falls, but some houses remained dark, as if their power was out entirely. That's when she noticed them. Animals were moving through the streets. At first, Maya thought she was imagining things, but as she watched more carefully, she realized that dozens of animals, dogs, cats, even some wild creatures like foxes and raccoons, were all moving in the same direction. They weren't running or playing. They were walking with purpose, all heading toward the outskirts of town, toward the dam. "This is impossible," Maya whispered, but Lily clapped her hands excitedly, as if she understood exactly what was happening. The phone rang again. This time it was Dr. Sarah Winters, the town's only veterinarian. "Maya, I need to ask you something that might sound crazy. Have you noticed anything unusual about animals today? I've had 17 emergency calls in the past 2 hours. People's pets are acting like they've never acted before. Some are completely agitated. Others are unusually calm, but all of them seem to be responding to something I can't identify." Maya hesitated. How could she explain what she'd witnessed without sounding insane? I saw the bear rescue at the dam today," she said carefully. "You were there? Thank God someone else witnessed it. The dam worker, Jack Morrison, has been calling around town trying to find someone who saw what happened. He says his equipment recorded some kind of audio frequency that shouldn't have been possible, and he swears the wind patterns changed in ways that defied meteorology." Maya felt her heart racing. What kind of audio frequency? That's the thing. It was in a range that humans can barely hear, but it's exactly the frequency range that many animals use to communicate across long distances. Jack's convinced that something or someone coordinated that rescue, but he can't explain how. After Dr. Winters hung up, Maya sat in her rocking chair and looked at her daughter with new eyes. Lily was playing peacefully with her stuffed rabbit, occasionally making those soft musical sounds that seemed to come so naturally to her. "What are you really, baby?" Maya asked softly. As if in answer, Lily dropped her rabbit and crawled over to Maya's feet. She pulled herself up to standing and looked directly into her mother's eyes. For a moment that felt like hours. The baby's gaze held an intelligence that seemed far older than her 18 months. Then Lily reached up one tiny hand and gently touched Maya's cheek. The moment their skin connected, Maya felt something extraordinary. Images flashed through her mind, not her own memories, but something else entirely. She saw the forest from a perspective much closer to the ground, smelled scents she'd never experienced, heard sounds and frequencies her ears couldn't normally detect. She saw the cub at the dam not as she had from her window, but from much closer, as if she had been there herself. She felt the terror of the rushing water, the exhaustion of fighting against the current, the hope when help finally came. But more than that, she felt connections. Invisible threads linking every living thing in the valley. Bears, birds, her neighbors' pets, the worker at the dam, and somehow, at the center of it all, her baby daughter. Maya gasped and pulled back, the visions fading instantly. Lily smiled and patted her mother's cheek gently, then crawled back to her toys as if nothing extraordinary had happened. Maya sat in stunned silence. What had just occurred was impossible by every scientific and logical standard she knew. But the images had been so vivid, so real, that she couldn't dismiss them as imagination. Outside, the strange migration of animals continued. Maya watched a family of deer walk calmly down Main Street, followed by what looked like half the town's dog population. They moved in complete silence, as if following some unheard instruction. Then she noticed something that made her blood run cold. People were starting to follow them. At first, it was just a few individuals. She recognized Tom Miller from down the road, walking slowly behind his usually unruly chickens. He looked dazed, almost sleepwalking. Then she saw the Henderson family coming out of their house. They moved with the same purposeful but distant manner, following their cat who was finally descending from the attic. More and more people emerged from their homes. Not everyone, maybe one person from each household, but enough to form a strange procession moving through the darkening streets. Maya felt a chill that had nothing to do with the temperature. They're all going to the dam, she realized. She looked at Lily, who was now sitting perfectly still, her attention focused entirely on something Maya couldn't see or hear. The baby's expression was one of deep concentration, as if she was performing some complex task. The lights in their house flickered again, and this time they stayed off. Emergency lighting kicked in, casting eerie shadows around the room. Maya made a decision. She couldn't stay here wondering what was happening. She needed to see for herself what was drawing half the town toward the dam. She quickly gathered Lily's diaper bag and dressed both of them warmly. The baby didn't fuss at being disturbed. If anything, she seemed eager to go outside. As they stepped onto the porch, Maya was struck by how quiet the night had become. Despite dozens of people and animals moving through the streets, there was almost no sound. Even the typical evening noises, traffic, televisions, dogs barking, had ceased. Maya strapped Lily into her stroller and joined the strange procession. She expected to feel afraid, but instead she felt an odd sense of peace, It was as if she belonged here, moving with this group toward whatever awaited them at the dam. The people around her seemed to be in a trance-like state. She recognized many of them, neighbors she'd known for years, but none of them acknowledged her presence or spoke to each other. They just walked, their eyes fixed ahead, following the animals who led the way. Maya noticed that each person was accompanied by a specific animal. Tom Miller walked beside his chickens. Mrs. Patterson moved in step with her elderly golden retriever. The Hendersons followed their mysterious cat. But Maya was different. She had chosen to come. She wasn't compelled like the others seemed to be. As they approached the dam, Maya could see lights and activity ahead. More people were already there, standing in a large semicircle around the water. The animals had arranged themselves in their own pattern, a complex formation that reminded Maya of ancient stone circles. Jack Morrison, the dam worker, stood near the control building looking bewildered and concerned. He was clearly trying to understand what was happening, but seemed as confused as Maya felt. That's when she saw them again. The bears. The entire family from earlier that day had returned, including the cub and its mother. But they weren't alone. More bears emerged from the forest. Old ones, young ones, even cubs that couldn't have been more than a few months old. They took their place in the circle of animals, and Maya realized she was witnessing something that had probably never happened in recorded history. A gathering of every species in the valley, predators and prey side by side, domestic and wild animals together in peaceful assembly. And at the center of it all, the water of the dam reflected the strange, swirling clouds above like a dark mirror. A low humming filled the air. It seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. Maya felt it in her bones, in her chest, in the deepest parts of her being. Then she looked down at Lily and understood. The humming was coming from her daughter, but it wasn't just Lily anymore. Every baby and young animal in the gathering was producing the same sound in perfect harmony. The human adults and older animals stood in silence, but the young ones, infants, cubs, chicks, puppies, they were all part of this incredible chorus. Maya watched in amazement as the sound grew stronger and more complex. Harmonies layered upon harmonies, creating music unlike anything she'd ever heard. It was beautiful and alien at the same time, ancient and timeless. The water in the dam began to glow. At first, Maya thought it was reflecting the strange light from the clouds above. But as the humming grew louder, she realized the light was coming from within the water itself. It started as a faint phosphorescence but grew brighter and more vibrant with each passing moment. Patterns swirled in the glowing water. Spirals and symbols that seemed to have meaning just beyond Maya's comprehension. The light pulsed in rhythm with the humming, as if the sound was somehow calling forth this luminescence. Jack Morrison was frantically checking his equipment, clearly trying to find a scientific explanation for what he was witnessing. But his instruments only recorded silence, as if the incredible symphony occurring around him existed on a frequency his machines couldn't detect. The mother bear, who had been reunited with her cub earlier that day, stepped forward. She approached the edge of the glowing water and let out a low, rumbling call. One by one, animals from each species answered her. Wolves howled, birds sang, deer called out in their strange whistling voices. It was as if each species was announcing its presence, adding its voice to some cosmic roll call. Then something extraordinary happened to the humans in the gathering. Those who had walked to the dam in their trance-like state suddenly awakened. Maya watched as recognition dawned in their eyes, as awareness returned. But instead of fear or confusion, their faces showed wonder and understanding. Mrs. Patterson looked around in amazement, then down at her dog, who was still humming that strange, harmonious sound. "Oh my," she whispered. "We're all here. We're all really here." Tom Miller knelt beside his chickens, tears streaming down his face. "I can hear them," he said in awe. "I can actually hear what they're saying." Maya realized that the gathering had done something to these people, opened a door in their minds that had been closed their entire lives. They could now perceive the communications that had always existed between species but had been invisible to human awareness. The water continued to glow more brightly, and shapes began to form in its depths. Maya saw images that defied explanation. Vast forests that might have existed thousands of years ago, migrations of animals across continents, connections between all living things forming a web of light across the planet. She understood that what was happening here wasn't just about their small valley. This was part of something much larger, much older. The barriers between species were dissolving, revealing connections that had always existed but had been forgotten by humanity as civilization advanced. Lily's humming reached a crescendo, joined by every young voice in the gathering. The light in the water blazed so brightly that it illuminated the entire valley like daylight. For one incredible moment, Maya could see streams of light connecting every living thing present, gossamer threads of energy linking each animal to every other, forming a vast, beautiful network. Then, as suddenly as it had begun, everything stopped. The humming ceased. The lights faded. The water returned to its normal dark state. But something fundamental had changed. Maya could feel it in the air around her, see it in the eyes of the people and animals gathered at the dam. A barrier had been crossed, a connection re-established. The animals began to disperse, each species departing as peacefully as they had arrived. But they didn't go separately. Mixed groups formed naturally, predators and prey side by side, domestic and wild animals together. The people, too, began to head home. But their movements were different now, more graceful, more aware. Many stopped to gently pet animals they passed, and the creatures responded with trust and affection. Maya looked down at Lily, who had fallen asleep in her stroller, exhausted by whatever incredible work she had just performed. The baby's face was serene, and Maya thought she saw a faint smile at the corners of her tiny mouth. As they walked home through streets that somehow felt different, more alive, more connected, Maya noticed that the electronic disturbances had stopped. Lights worked normally. The air had lost its electric charge, and even the strange weather patterns seemed to be clearing. But the most remarkable change was in the people they passed. Neighbors stopped to talk to each other with genuine interest and warmth. Children played together regardless of social boundaries, and everywhere, people interacted with animals in ways Maya had never seen. Conversations seemed to be taking place without words. Understanding passed between species through looks and gestures. Mrs. Patterson caught up with them on the walk home, her elderly dog trotting contentedly beside her. "Maya, what do you think happened back there?" she asked, but her voice held wonder rather than fear. Maya considered the question carefully. "I think something was restored. Something we lost a long time ago." Mrs. Patterson nodded thoughtfully. "I know it sounds impossible, but I swear I could understand what my dog was thinking. He was thanking me for all the years of care and telling me about places he'd like to explore together." Maya smiled. "Maybe it's not as impossible as we thought." When they reached home, Maya noticed that their house felt different too. Warmer, more harmonious. Even Lily's toys seemed to have arranged themselves in more pleasing patterns. As she tucked her remarkable daughter into bed, Maya whispered, "What other gifts do you have, little one? What other miracles are waiting to unfold?" Lily opened her eyes briefly and looked at her mother with that ancient wisdom Maya had glimpsed before. The baby reached up one tiny hand and touched Maya's forehead. Once again, images flashed through Maya's mind. But this time, instead of the past, she saw glimpses of the future. She saw Lily growing up in a world where the barriers between species continued to dissolve. She saw children communicating naturally with animals, forests protected by the mutual understanding between humans and wildlife, and cities designed in harmony with nature. She saw her daughter becoming a bridge between two worlds, the old world of separation and the new world of connection. And she saw that what had happened at the dam tonight was just the beginning. As Maya fell asleep that night, she dreamed of a young girl running through forests, accompanied by wolves and bears, speaking in languages humans had forgotten, healing the ancient wounds between civilization and nature. She dreamed of a future where her daughter would teach the world to remember its connection to all living things. But she also dreamed of challenges ahead, of those who would fear this change and try to stop it. And in her deepest dreams, she heard Lily's voice, grown older but still carrying that same mysterious harmony, saying words that would stay with Maya for the rest of her life. "The earth remembers, Mama. It's time for humans to remember too." Maya woke to silence. Not the ordinary quiet of early morning, but something deeper. An absence of sound that felt almost physical. No birds singing their dawn chorus, no distant traffic, not even the usual hum of electrical appliances that typically formed the background soundtrack of daily life. She glanced at the clock beside her bed, 6:47 a.m., but the digital display was completely black. The power was out again, but this felt different from the flickering disturbances of the night before. This felt intentional. Lily's room next door was equally silent. Too silent. Maya's heart hammered as she rushed to her daughter's crib, but what she found there made her stop in her tracks. Lily was awake, sitting up with perfect posture, staring intently at something Maya couldn't see. The baby's eyes held that ancient wisdom again, but now there was something else. A kind of focused concentration that seemed impossible for someone so young. "Lily?" Maya whispered. Her daughter turned toward her, and for just a moment Maya could have sworn she saw words forming on those tiny lips. Not baby sounds, but actual words in a language Maya didn't recognize but somehow understood. "They're coming." Maya blinked hard, certain she'd imagined it. Babies didn't speak in full sentences, especially not 18-month-old babies. But Lily's expression held such clear intelligence, such obvious intent to communicate something important. A sound outside made Maya rush to the window. What she saw made her stomach drop. Military vehicles were rolling down Main Street. Not just one or two, but an entire convoy, trucks, jeeps, and what looked like scientific equipment mounted on trailers. They moved slowly, deliberately, surrounding the town like a noose tightening. Maya's phone rang, startling her from her shocked observance. It was Mrs. Patterson, and her voice was shaking. "Maya, are you seeing this? There are soldiers everywhere. They're setting up some kind of perimeter around Shadow Falls. And there's something else." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "They're taking people." "Taking people? What do you mean?" "The Hendersons are gone. I saw 3 men in hazmat suits escort them to a van early this morning. They weren't arrested. It was more like they were being quarantined. And Maya, I think it has something to do with last night." Maya felt ice in her veins. "Have they come to your house?" "Not yet, but I can see them going door to door 3 streets over." "Maya, whatever happened to us at the dam, I think someone noticed. Someone who doesn't like it." After hanging up, Maya quickly dressed Lily and herself. She had a terrible feeling that they needed to leave, and soon. But as she gathered their essential belongings, she heard the sound she'd been dreading: vehicle engines stopping outside her house. Through the window, she watched 4 people in full hazmat suits emerge from a black SUV. They moved with military precision, but Maya noticed something odd. The birds that had been absent all morning suddenly appeared, landing on nearby trees and rooftops. They weren't singing, they were watching, silent sentinels observing the intruders. A knock came at the front door. Not a police knock, but something more formal, more ominous. "Mrs. Chen, this is Dr. Elizabeth Hawthorne from the Centers for Disease Control. We need to speak with you about a potential exposure event that occurred in your area yesterday." Maya looked at Lily, who was watching the front door with remarkable calm for a baby who should have been frightened by the serious voices of strangers. "Mama," Lily said clearly. It was the first time she'd ever spoken that word so distinctly. But Maya barely had time to process this milestone before her daughter continued. "Bad people. Hide." Maya's blood ran cold. There was no mistaking it this time. Lily had spoken in complete sentences. But more than that, her daughter seemed to understand the danger they were in. "Mrs. Chen, we have authorization to enter if necessary. We're here to help, but we need your cooperation." Maya made a split-second decision. She grabbed Lily and their emergency bag, slipped out the back door, and ran toward the forest behind their house. She didn't know where they were going, but her daughter's warning had triggered an instinct stronger than rational thought. Behind them, she heard the front door being forced open, followed by shouts and the sound of heavy boots moving through her house. They reached the tree line just as Maya heard someone yell, "They're not here!" "Check the perimeter." The forest felt different as they entered it. Not darker or more threatening, but more alive somehow. The trees seemed to lean in protectively, and Maya noticed that the path she was following wasn't one she'd ever seen before, despite having walked these woods many times over the years. Lily had gone completely quiet, but she pointed confidently in specific directions, as if she knew exactly where they were going. After what felt like hours, but was probably only 20 minutes, they emerged into a small clearing Maya had never seen before. In the center stood the most extraordinary sight, a gathering of people and animals unlike anything she could have imagined. Tom Miller was there, sitting peacefully beside his chickens. The Henderson family, whom Mrs. Patterson had thought were taken, were also present, along with about 30 other people from Shadow Falls. But they weren't alone. Every person was accompanied by animals. Not just pets, but wild creatures, deer, foxes, even a few wolves, and they were clearly communicating with each other in ways that defied explanation. Mrs. Patterson approached Maya with tears in her eyes. "Thank goodness you made it. We've been waiting for you." "Waiting for me? How did you all get here? I thought the Hendersons were taken." "They tried to take us," Mr. Henderson explained. "But the strangest thing happened. When those people in suits approached our house, our cat started making sounds I'd never heard before. Then every animal in our neighborhood began responding. The next thing we knew, we could understand what they were saying. They told us to follow them," Mrs. Henderson added. "Said there was a safe place. The people in suits couldn't follow us because—" She paused, looking uncertain. "Because what?" Tom Miller stood up, brushing dirt from his clothes. "Because the animals wouldn't let them. Maya, you should have seen it. Every dog in the neighborhood formed a barrier. The soldiers were afraid to move past them." Maya looked around the clearing with growing amazement. "But how did you know I was coming? How did you know to wait for me?" An elderly man she didn't recognize stepped forward. He had the weathered face of someone who'd spent his life outdoors, and his eyes held the same ancient wisdom she'd been seeing in Lily's. "Because the little one told us you would come," he said, gesturing toward a small figure sitting near a group of bear cubs. Maya's breath caught. It was another child, maybe 3 years old, but like Lily, his eyes held an intelligence far beyond his apparent age. "There are others?" Maya whispered. "More than you might think," the old man replied. "I'm Samuel Running Wolf. I've been waiting for this day for 70 years. Waiting for what day?" Samuel smiled and gestured to a log beside him. "Sit, and I'll tell you a story your scientists would call impossible." As Maya settled down with Lily in her arms, Samuel began to speak. "My grandmother told me that this had happened before, long ago. She called it the Great Remembering. She said that every few generations, when humans had forgotten too much of their connection to the earth, certain children would be born with the ability to restore it." "Children like Lily?" "Children like all of them," Samuel said, pointing to several young ones scattered throughout the clearing. "They're appearing everywhere, not just here, but around the world. Some scientists are calling it a genetic anomaly. Others think it's environmental. But my grandmother knew what it really was." Maya watched as Lily babbled happily to a young fox that had approached them. The animal seemed to be listening intently, occasionally making soft, chittering sounds in response. "What did your grandmother say it was?" "She said the earth has its own consciousness, its own way of protecting itself. When the balance becomes too disrupted, it sends helpers, bridges between the old world and the new." A commotion at the edge of the clearing interrupted their conversation. 3 people in hazmat suits had somehow managed to track them down. They were standing at the tree line, but what Maya saw next defied all logic. The animals weren't attacking the intruders, but they had formed an impenetrable wall around the clearing. Bears stood shoulder to shoulder with deer. Wolves sat calmly beside rabbits. Birds formed a canopy overhead, so dense that it blocked most of the sunlight. One of the suited figures tried to push through, but the animals simply moved closer together. When he tried to go around, they shifted to block his path again. They weren't aggressive, but they were absolutely immovable. "Dr. Peterson," one of them called out. "The containment field is holding. They can't get through." "Containment field?" Maya felt a chill run down her spine. The person in charge, presumably Dr. Peterson, raised a megaphone. "Citizens of Shadow Falls, you are not in danger. We are here to help you understand what happened to you last night, but you need to come with us for evaluation and treatment." Samuel Running Wolf stood up slowly and walked toward the edge of the clearing. The animals parted to let him through, but immediately closed ranks behind him. "Dr. Peterson," he called out, his voice carrying clearly across the distance. "I'm Samuel Running Wolf, and I've been expecting you for a very long time." The lead figure lowered the megaphone. "Mr. Running Wolf, we have reports that you've been spreading disinformation about last night's events. We need you to come with us immediately." Samuel laughed, a sound full of genuine humor. "Disinformation? Doctor? What would you call a group of scientists who can't recognize a miracle when it's standing right in front of them? What we witnessed last night was a mass hallucination caused by an unknown environmental toxin. These people need medical attention." "And the animals? Did they also experience hallucinations?" There was a pause before Dr. Peterson answered. "The animal behavior is anomalous, but that's why we need to study this phenomenon before it spreads further." Maya felt her heart sink. Before it spreads further. They weren't here to help. They were here to stop something they saw as a threat. Lily suddenly stirred in her arms and looked directly at the suited figures. Then, to Maya's amazement, her baby daughter stood up in her arms and let out that same piercing call she'd made the day before. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Every animal in the clearing began vocalizing at once, not the chaotic noise of frightened creatures, but a coordinated symphony. Bears roared, wolves howled, birds sang. Even the smallest creatures added their voices to the chorus. But more than that, the sound was joined by others from far beyond the clearing. Maya could hear the calls being taken up by animals throughout the forest, across the valley, even from the mountains beyond. And then something extraordinary happened to the people in hazmat suits. Their equipment began malfunctioning. The electronic devices they carried sparked and went dead. Their communication systems filled with static. Even their protective suits seemed to deflate slightly, as if the air itself was changing. But most remarkably, Dr. Peterson began removing her helmet. "What are you doing?" one of her companions shouted. I can hear them," she said, her voice filled with wonder. "I can actually hear what they're saying." The moment her helmet came off completely, her expression changed from clinical detachment to something approaching reverence. "My God," she whispered, "they're not just making noise. They're singing, together, in harmony." One by one, the other suited figures began removing their protective gear, drawn by the incredible symphony surrounding them. Maya watched as the same transformation she'd witnessed the night before began happening to these new arrivals. The walls they'd built around their minds to separate themselves from the natural world were crumbling under the power of the children's call. Samuel approached Dr. Peterson, who was now standing without any protection, tears streaming down her face. "Doctor," he said gently, "would you like to understand what you're really investigating here?" She nodded mutely, unable to speak through her emotional overwhelm. "Then listen, not with your instruments or your theories, but with the part of you that remembers being a child who talked to animals and believed in magic." Maya held Lily close as the clearing filled with an energy she could feel in her bones. The children, all of them, were humming now in that same harmony that had transformed the dam the night before. But this time, the effect was different. Instead of the water glowing, the air itself began to shimmer with an almost invisible radiance. And in that shimmer, Maya saw glimpses of what the world might become. Cities designed in harmony with nature, humans and animals working together. Technology that enhanced rather than destroyed the natural balance. She saw her daughter, older now, standing before great assemblies of world leaders, teaching them in that same mysterious language that transcended words. She saw a future where the barriers between all species had dissolved completely, where consciousness was recognized as a shared gift rather than a human monopoly. But she also saw the resistance that would come, those who would fight against this change, who would view it as a threat to human dominance rather than an evolution towards something greater. The visions faded as the humming stopped, but their impact lingered in everyone present. Dr. Peterson looked around the clearing with new eyes, seeing not subjects to be studied, but beings to be understood. "We're going to have to completely revise our approach," she said to her colleagues. "This isn't a contamination event. This is something else entirely." Samuel smiled. "Doctor, what would you say if I told you that your own daughter exhibits some of these same abilities?" Dr. Peterson's eyes widened. "How did you—" "She's been saying strange things lately, claiming she can understand our cat. We assumed it was just imagination." "Perhaps," Samuel suggested gently, "it's time to listen to her imagination." As the sun climbed higher in the sky, Maya realized that their hidden refuge in the forest was about to become something else entirely. A place where two worlds would meet and begin the long process of learning to coexist. She looked down at Lily, who had fallen asleep in her arms, exhausted by the incredible work she'd just performed. "What have you started, little one?" Maya whispered. But deep in her heart, she already knew the answer. Her daughter hadn't started anything. She was simply helping the world remember what it had always been meant to be. The real question now was whether humanity was ready to remember along with her. 1 year later, Maya stood in the same clearing where everything had changed. But it was no longer hidden. The forest refuge had become something extraordinary, a place where scientists, indigenous elders, and families with gifted children worked together in ways the world had never seen before. Dr. Peterson, now free from her hazmat suit permanently, had become one of their strongest advocates, documenting the phenomenon in ways that even the most skeptical academics couldn't dismiss. Lily, now walking confidently on her own little legs, toddled between the animals with the easy familiarity of someone visiting old friends. She had grown into her abilities, but more remarkably, so had the world around her. The changes hadn't been limited to shadow falls. Reports came in daily from every continent. Children like Lily appearing in remote villages, in bustling cities, even in the halls of government buildings, their presence gradually transforming how humans related to the natural world. Maya watched as her daughter approached the same bear family they'd first encountered at the dam. The cub, now grown larger and stronger, greeted Lily with gentle huffing sounds. The mother bear, the one who had waved her paw in gratitude that day, touched her nose to Lily's outstretched hand. "The connection is stabilizing globally," Dr. Peterson said, joining Maya with tablet in hand. "Whatever resistance the governments initially planned has largely dissolved. It's hard to maintain policies of containment when half your staff can suddenly communicate with their pets." Samuel Running Wolf approached them, moving with the careful dignity of his years, but with eyes sparkling with satisfaction. "My grandmother would have been pleased," he said. "She always said this generation would be the one to heal the Great Divide." "What happens now?" Maya asked, still amazed by how normal it all seemed now. Children playing with wolf cubs, scientists taking notes on conversations with dolphins, military officers learning forestry from talking trees. "Now," Samuel said, settling onto his favorite log, "we grow." As if summoned by his words, a familiar mechanical sound echoed across the valley. But this time, instead of the threatening groan of closing floodgates, it was something entirely different. The dam was being dismantled. Not destroyed, but carefully taken apart, stone by stone, its materials repurposed for projects that worked with the river's natural flow rather than against it. Maya could see teams of humans and beavers working side by side, the animals' engineering expertise finally recognized and valued. "The river will run free again," Dr. Peterson observed. "Just like it was meant to." Lily suddenly tugged on Maya's hand, pointing excitedly toward the sky. A golden eagle circled overhead, crying out in a voice that seemed to carry words of celebration across the mountains. One by one, other voices joined in. The bears, the wolves, the people. Even the trees seemed to whisper in the wind. It was the same harmony they'd heard that first night at the dam, but fuller now, richer, involving thousands of voices from across the valley and beyond. Maya lifted Lily up so she could see better. The little girl clapped her hands and added her own voice to the chorus, not the piercing call of that first day, but something gentler, more integrated, the sound of someone who belonged completely to the symphony around her. "Mama," Lily said, pointing to the dismantled dam, then to the forest, then to all the people and animals working together, balanced. It was perhaps the most profound word Maya had ever heard. Not good or better or fixed, but balanced. As if her daughter understood that this wasn't about humans becoming less important, or animals becoming more important. It was about finding the equilibrium that had always been meant to exist. Dr. Peterson's radio crackled to life. "Dr. Peterson, this is Base Command. We're receiving reports from monitoring stations worldwide. The phenomenon has stabilized at 100% global coverage. Repeat, the integration is complete." Maya felt tears stream down her face, but they were tears of joy. The fear she had carried for a year, that this gift might be taken away, that the government would find a way to reverse what had happened, finally dissolved. "Complete," she whispered. Samuel nodded sagely. The earth has welcomed her children home. As the sun set over the valley, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson, the great symphony began to quiet. People and animals started to disperse, heading to homes and dens, but moving together in mixed groups that would have been impossible to imagine just years before. Maya carried Lily back toward their new house, larger now, built with the help of both human and animal communities, designed to exist in perfect harmony with the forest around it. "Lily," Maya said as she tucked her remarkable daughter into bed, "do you remember that first day, when you saved the bear cub?" Lily looked up at her mother with those ancient knowing eyes. "Not saved, Mama, awakened." Maya kissed her daughter's forehead and smiled. "What did you awaken, sweetheart?" "Everything," Lily said simply, then yawned and closed her eyes. "Everything remembers now." As Maya turned off the light, she heard the gentle sounds of the nighttime forest. Owls calling, wolves singing in the distance, the whisper of wind through leaves. But now, instead of seeming foreign or separate, these sounds felt like lullabies. She looked out the window one last time before going to her own bed. In the moonlight, she could see pairs of eyes reflecting the silver light. Deer, foxes, bears, raccoons, all the creatures of the forest keeping watch over the sleeping village. Not as guardians against danger, but as family keeping watch over family. Maya fell asleep to the sound of purring. Not from a house cat, but from something much larger outside her window. Through her dreams, she heard the mountain lions of the high peaks adding their voices to the great chorus of contentment that now echoed across a healed world. And in the morning, when Lily woke with dirt under her fingernails and leaves in her hair, Maya no longer worried about where her daughter had spent the night. She simply smiled and asked, "What did you learn today, little one?" Because in this new world, that was the most important question of all. The bear cub that had once been trapped between closing floodgates now roamed free through valleys where every creature's voice mattered, where every consciousness was valued, where the barriers between species had become bridges instead. And a little girl who had once been just 18 months old had shown the world that the most shocking thing wasn't what she could do. It was what they had all forgotten they could do too. The earth remembered. And so, finally, did everyone else.